Hello and welcome to History After Dark. When most of us picture the Olympics, we think of medals flashing in stadium lights, flags rising to anthems, record boards ticking upward. The first Olympics were nothing like that. They took place under a hot Greek sky on bare earth. There were no medals, no national teams, no sponsors, and no lanes of synthetic track. The prize was a ring of olive leaves cut from a sacred tree, with a golden sickle set upon a winner's hair by grave judges in purple robes, while the sanctuary watched in silence. To compete was not just to run or throw. It was to stand in the sight of Zeus, to swear an oath before a god who punishes perjury, to risk your body for an idea the Greeks called kleos glory, that survives you when your bones do not. Tonight let the room dim and the breath slow. We will step into that valley and feel in a steady, gentle way exactly what it was like to compete in the original Olympic Games. Our story begins far from the sacred grove. It begins in a small village where strength comes from chores, not training plans. Before dawn, a boy carries clay jars from the well, coaxes goats along stony paths, and turns soil beneath the leaves of olive trees. He eats what most people in Greece ate: coarse barley bread called maza olives and figs, goat's cheese, perhaps a little fish and watered wine. He runs because things are far apart, and because feet are faster than donkeys on a narrow slope. One afternoon, with the cicadas singing so loudly, it almost sounds like rain, a boast among boys becomes a race to a single olive tree on a ridge. He reaches it first and is not out of breath. A traveling elder, a man who says he has seen Corinth and Sparta, and speaks as if there is no need to prove it, studies the boy's stride the way a trainer does. He looks at legs, shoulders, breath, and says one word that reorders the map inside the boy's mind: Olympia, not a myth told by an uncle after dark. A place. To get there, he must enter the house of sweat and oil, the gymnasian colonnades for shade, long earthen tracks for sprints, a square of fine dust in the palestra for wrestling, basins of water, pegs for hanging oil flasks and strigils. Training happens naked. Olive oil goes on the skin, sand dusts it for grip. The air smells of crushed leaves, warm metal, and work. At the end of each session, the strigil, a curved bronze scraper, whispers along the skin, pulling away oil, dust, and fatigue and amber ribbons. Two kinds of teachers live here. The Peta tribe shapes boys, how to stand, how to grip, how to move without waste. The gymnast shapes contenders, how to cycle work and rest, how to accept Ponos, the purposeful pain that turns effort into ability. Stones are lifted and carried, not because any judge will ask you to, but because the back and hands a stone builds are useful everywhere. Sprints are run across soft river sand that eats strength and gives back power. The discus is a lesson in geometry. You learn with hips and shoulders instead of chalk and slate. The bronze plate leaves the fingers only when the body moves in the sequence. Your coach has spoken into you 1,000 times: heel. Hip, shoulder, arm, release. The long jump uses halteres, stone hand weights arcing forward, and then snapping back midair to pull your center of mass across your own line. The javelin, a shaft of cornel wood with a bronze tip, has a leather thong, the ankylē, wrapped around its middle. The thong unwinds at release, giving the spear spin and range. The sound it makes when thrown correctly is small and satisfied, like a quiet breath. Food is fuel and philosophy at once. Most Greeks valued a measured, modest diet: barley, cheese, figs, a little fish, watered wine, for balance rather than bulk. Some trainers, especially in later centuries, insisted on meat in quantity, arguing that strength eats strength. Others warned meat makes a man heavy and impure. What you eat depends on who commands you. You obey because the price of disobedience is paid in public. It is not all sweat and drills. The ideology of training matters. Your body is spoken of as a statue in rough stone, and your work is the chisel that frees the form within. Praise is rare. Correction is constant. A switch cut from an olive branch may tap a shoulder blade with a sting more memorable than any speech. The vocabulary is precise. Do not meet strength with strength. Turn it. Let the stones pull you forward. Do not fight them. The start line is the balbus, a carefully cut stone with twin grooves for your toes. The start device, the hysplex, is a web of cords and wooden arms that snaps forward and punishes false starts with a tangle you do not wish to meet twice. The judge's assistants carry whips not because cruelty is sport, but because discipline has to be visible and audible for 1,000 men to accept it at once. While you grind away in your city's gymnasium, word arrives that changes the air itself, the proclamation of the ekecheiria, the sacred truce. Heralds called spondophoroi, dust on their hems, staffs in their hands, announce, the games will be held. Those who travel to and from Olympia must be unharmed. War pauses. Roads clear. For a span of weeks, Zeus is the guarantor of safe passage. You go on foot with your trainer and an attendant who carries oil, bread, and quiet. The road west slips across the Isthmus of Corinth and then through hills, vineyards, and dry riverbeds. Travelers join your pace in twos and tens until the road is a moving artery of dialects and intentions. You sleep in a xenon, a guest house with straw on the floor, if there is room and money. Often you sleep under a cart or a sky that feels unusually close. In the crowd you notice men, the way hunters notice weather. A Theban with a neck like a column and a wrestler's hands. A boy from Argos who walks in straight lines as if taught never to waste a step. A Sicilian whose calves are carved by hills. No one quarrels, truce forbids it, but rivalry shimmers like heat. At last the roofs of Elis appear. Elis administers the sanctuary. Here live the Hellenodikai, the judges of the Hellenes. Who will watch you for a month and decide who may proceed? There is no pageantry. They take down your name, your father's name, your city. They look at your body for age, for injuries, for what time and training have written there. They enforce a common table, barley cakes, cheese, figs, a deliberate leveling before the god. For 30 days you train under their eyes, and men are dismissed without ceremony when they fail until the day a herald unrolls a list and reads names in a voice that makes grown men feel small. When yours is spoken, the world is briefly quiet. You have not won anything. You have survived the first gate. The road from Elis to Olympia is short but solemn. The procession pauses at a spring. Hands and faces are washed. No one jokes. At dawn of the second day, you crest a low hill and see the valley. Olive and plane trees and the cluster of sacred buildings inside a rough wall called the Altis, the sacred precinct, the temple of Hera, older and sober. The line of treasuries, small buildings raised by cities to honor gods and advertise wealth. The long, low wrestling school, the gymnasium, the vaulted passage called the crypt that leads into the stadium, and dominating the view, the great temple of Zeus, where once sat a statue so vast it would later be counted among the 7 wonders ivory, flesh, gold drapery, and eyes that did not move, and yet made men behave. In the open air stands the altar of Zeus, not a cut stone table, but a rising cone of compacted ash built from centuries of burned thigh bones and fat. A gray-black hill of memory added to year after year. Your trainer's hand on your shoulder is heavier than usual. He does not explain where you are. You can feel it. The first order of business is not the track. It is the oath. A herald summons you to the Bouleuterion, the council house. Inside, incense hangs in cool air. A bronze statue of Zeus Horkios, Zeus of the Oath, stands with thunderbolts in both hands, face set in a way that tells you he is not the Zeus for stories by the fire. He is the Zeus who notices if you mean what you say. Priests slit a boar and lay its pieces at the god's feet. You and the other competitors place your hands on the warm meat and repeat words every Greek boy learned to fear and respect. You have trained for the required 10 months. You will obey the judges. You will take no bribe and offer none. You accept that punishment will follow perjury. Your trainer swears too, and your father if he has come. The oath binds all of you to one another and to the god. Outside, sunlight feels new. The sanctuary fills. Boys' contests may be held first, sometimes on the opening day. Wrestling, boxing, foot races for the younger classes to teach them fear and courage. You learn the geography with your feet, where the shade falls at noon, where the water jars stand, which portico catches the wind. The third day brings the hecatomb 100 oxen sacrificed on that ash altar, the smoke rising in a column so dark it looks like a road upright to the sky. Then the meat is cooked and eaten by the crowd, because the gods take smoke and we take flesh. Piety and appetite shake hands. One morning the tide of sound pulls you toward the hippodrome, a long oblong of packed earth beyond the sacred wall. Flanked by grassy slopes where tens of thousands stand or sit in dust, this is where wealth competes. In the 4-horse race, the teth-rippin owners are the victors, and the wreath is theirs. Drivers risk death for someone else's glory. The starting mechanism is clever, staggered release ropes and signals shaped like an eagle and a dolphin ensure fairness. The turn at the far post is where skill shows itself and where fear lives. A wheel clips the post, wood splinters, horses scream. Dust swallows the track. The crowd flows like water around luck and loss. People tell you about Tarasipos, the horse frightener, a spot on the course that unnerves beasts. They explain it like a myth and a practical joke at once. After the races, the sanctuary feels both grand and remote spectacle you admire but cannot own. Your contests will be nearer to the ground and to consequence. You pass through the crypt into the stadium, a long rectangle of earth, about 1 stadion in length, roughly 600 feet in the local measure, near 192 meters bounded by grassy banks instead of marble seats. The bulbous waits with its twin grooves for toes. The hysplex's cords tremble like nerves before a start. Judges stand rigid. Assistants hold rods to enforce order. The program varies by period, but by the classical era, the pentathlon has a proud place. Discus, long jump, javelin, stadion sprint, and wrestling. It is not about being the strongest or the fastest. It is about being the most complete, the man whose abilities meet in the middle, where the Greeks believed excellence lives. You grip the discus. The bronze feels cool and heavy, then warm and familiar. You turn as taught. Foot sets heel, hip leads, shoulder, arm follows, fingers speak the last word. The disc leaves your hand with a shiver and turns into a small sun that thuds into earth where a judge will drop a marker. You keep your face calm and hope your trainer approves of your silence. For the jump, the flute player stands near the runway. His melody is not performance. It is a metronome that helps every approach find the same steps in the same places. You swing halters forward, then back. And at takeoff, you thrust them forward and snap them toward your hips in the air to pull your center over the sand. The landing is a conversation with dust. The javelin is next. You loop the ankylē around your fingers so it will unwind at the release and make the spear fly level and true. A Corinthian makes his throw look like music. A Theban wrestles the air and loses. Your throw is not a poem, but it goes far enough. The stadion sprint comes with a rush of heat and blood in the ears. False starts bring the lash. Starts bring the sense that your body is a single idea executed at speed. The final is wrestling. 3 falls decide the matter: shoulders, back, or hips to ground, or a submission. Your opponent is a specialist, broad through neck and chest. He slams you once, and the earth shows you what it means to have no air in you. Then you do as you were taught. Do not meet a rock with a rock. Be the river that moves the rock. You pivot set the hip and send him past his own feet. The third fall is ugly and honest. Skin slick with oil and dust, hands uncertain, breath loud enough to embarrass you. He reaches too far, and you feel the hinge in the position. You take it, silence, then hands raise yours. A wreath does not fall from the sky yet, but it is closer than it has ever been. Not every contest ends in triumph and applause. Boxing picks patience with punishment. In earlier centuries, boxers bind hands with soft leather thongs. In later times, the wrappings stiffen and faces tell stories in scar and curve. There are no rounds, only endurance, and the judgment to place blows where bones break and resolve softens. The pankration is a different animal, a marriage of wrestling and striking with only biting and eye-gouging forbidden. Victory comes by submission or the loss of the will to continue. The most famous pancratiast from long ago, Arrhachion of Heraia, died while winning. As he strangled, he broke his opponent's ankle. The opponent signaled surrender, even as Arrhachion went limp. The judges crowned the dead man. It is a story Greeks told, because it said something they believed about price and prize. There is also Leonidas of Rhodes to consider centuries later, but always on people's lips at Olympia, who won the stadion. The dialos and the hoplitodromos, a race in armor, at 4 consecutive games. The name Leonidas became a way to measure human repetition. In wrestling circles, they talk about Milo of Croton, who was said to have trained by carrying a calf until it became a bull, and who once, the story goes, led his city's army dressed as Heracles, lion skin, and club and all. In boxing, they praise Onomastos of Smyrna, credited by tradition with codifying rules. In strength, they tell of Polydamas of Scotusa, who supposedly stopped a chariot by seizing it and held down lions with his hands. Tales may be but useful tales, because they teach boys to think of limits as something negotiable. Now we walk quietly to a part of the sanctuary where shame stands in bronze. Near the entrance to the stadium, a row of short statues of Zeus the Zanes line the way. They are not thank offerings from pious men. They are fines cast into metal. When athletes cheated, took bribes, offered bribes, broke oaths, Hellenodikai levied heavy penalties, and those coins purchased these statues so that all who entered would read the names and reasons and remember. Pausanias, a traveler who wrote what he saw in the 2nd century of our era, tells of Eupolos of Thessaly, who bribed boxers to lose in 388 BCE. He paid, and the Zanes grew. He tells of Callippus of Athens, a pentathlete who bribed rivals in 332. Athens stalled on paying the fine, and the judges barred Athenians from competing until the city humbled itself and paid more Zanes stood watch. There is the story of Sotades of Crete, a runner who first won for Crete and later took money to run for Ephesus. His own city exiled him, a punishment as Greek as any lash. You can pass these statues quickly if you like. The men who paid for them once passed them quickly too. The games were devout and also human. Cities paid stipends to victors, and sometimes to promising athletes before victory, because a wreath on a citizen's head shone on the whole city. Trainers built reputations and schools. Athletes moved to places that could feed them better and honor them more loudly. The line between citizen amateur and compensated professional blurs long before Victorian England. Pretended amateurs never got paid. The Hellenodikai strove for fairness. There were inspections, daily calls to order, disqualifications, and even lashings for line transgressions. But politics exists wherever pride does. Still, the games endured because most men most of the time wanted a clean victory more than a dirty one, and because a god's statue with thunderbolts has a way of focusing minds. People often ask what the daily life of a competitor looked like. It was ordinary in the useful ways. You slept where space allowed, under a portico, in a tent, in a crowded guest house. You washed with water and scraped clean with oil and sand and the strigil. You traded sandals for an extra flask of oil, borrowed bread, lent a blanket to a man from a city you once thought you hated, because the truce turns enemies into neighbors for a few days. You watched the treasuries where cities had set up bronze cauldrons and tripods and paintings. You measured your own hunger against the ash altar's shadow, and found that ritual can make an empty stomach feel full for an hour. You practiced darts in the early morning when the earth is cool. You learned where the flute player liked to stand and how to hear his rhythm under the crowd. You learned to sit when sitting is useful and to stop talking when breath will soon be needed. Women did not attend the men's games. The prohibition was harsh, at least in the way it was framed. Any married woman found within the precinct or even across the river during the festival could, by law, be thrown from a cliff. Explanations vary ritual purity, the nakedness of athletes, ancient fertility rites, but the rule is there. And yet, women appear in the story three ways. The first is defiance. Kallipateira, also called Pherenike, a widow of the champion Diagoras family of Rhodes, disguised herself as a trainer to see her son compete. When he won, she leapt the enclosure in joy. Her robe fell, her identity was known, and the judges faced a problem: letter of the law or gratitude to a family that had given Olympia so many wreaths. They spared her and immediately decreed that trainers, like athletes, must be naked, an oddly elegant solution that made future disguises awkward. The second is ambition within a loophole. Kyniska of Sparta, daughter of a king, owned and funded chariot teams and twice won the four-horse race. As owner, she was the victor. She set up victory inscriptions at Olympia. Spartan women had more freedom than most, but even she could not be present as a spectator. The third is a separate festival, the Heraia, women's games in honor of Hera, where unmarried girls ran a foot race in a shortened chiton with hair unbound. The victors received wreaths and a portion of sacrificial meat, and could set up painted portraits in Hera's temple less than the men's glory, but glory nonetheless. The last day at Olympia can be very quiet, even with the crowd still in the valley. Victors line up by the great temple of Zeus. On a table of ivory and gold lie the crowns cut from the sacred wild olive, a tree the Greeks called Kallistefanos, the beautifully crowned. A judge speaks names in the old sequence: your name, your father's name, your city's name, and the crowd confirms you exist. The wreath sits almost weightless on your head, and somehow heavier than any stone you lifted to get here. A palm branch is pressed into your hand. Ribbons and flowers fall. In the Prytaneon, the city hall of the sanctuary where the sacred fire burns, the victors are feasted. A poet may sing an eponychion, a victory ode, turning sweat and dust into vowels that last longer than either. Back home, honors wait if your city is generous. A money prize, free meals for life at the Prytaneon Cites' front row seats at the theater, prohedria, and the commission of a statue to stand in the gymnasium, a bronze body for boys to glance at when their lungs burn and they need something to chase. Some cities break a section of their wall for a victor to enter by a gap instead of a gate, a theatrical way to tell enemies, we are defended by citizens, not stones. Your father weeps in public and does not apologize. Your trainer smiles without correcting you and seems strange in gentleness. For a little while, walking is like floating. After the wreath, life does not end. It changes shape. Some victors become trainers, passing on the knowledge that made their bodies useful. Some become envoys or politicians. In a world where speech is a tool, a famous athlete's words weigh more than their content. Some, like the boxer Diagoras of Rhodes, become founders of athletic dynasties. There is a story that he lived to see his sons crowned, and was lifted on their shoulders through the stadium, and that someone called out, "Die now, Diagoras, for you cannot go to Olympus." A few champions like Theagenes of Thasos in later Thales attract a kind of hero cult after death. People visit their statues as if healing or luck can be coaxed from bronze. Most victors find that glory is loud and then it murmurs, and that you must make a second kind of peace with the city that loves and forgets you in turn. The games grew slowly from a narrow beginning. The Greeks told two myths to make the start feel worthy. That Pelops, a hero and lover of horses, won a chariot, race for a bride by guile and strength, and then held funeral games of that. Heracles, after his labors, founded contests to honor his father Zeus. History gives us a date 776 BE, when the first recorded victor Horkios of Elis, a cook, won the stadion foot race. At first, the program was simple. Over centuries, new races and events were added. The double-length dialos, the grueling long race, the hoplitodromos in armor, wrestling, boxing, the pentathlon, the pancration, horse, and chariot races. By the classical period, the festival could swell to tens of thousands, a city of canvas and intention rising in a sleepy valley every 4 years. Politicians bargained in the shade of treasuries, merchants sold figs and trinkets, rhapsodes recited Homer. Historians like Herodotus read their works, and above all of it, the ash altar rose another finger with every sacrifice. The end, when it came, was not a lost race, but a law. In 393 CE, the Emperor Theodosius I, committed to Christianity, issued decrees against pagan festivals. The Olympics, devoted to Zeus and flanked by sacrifices and statues of gods, fell silent. Earthquakes toppled columns in the 6th century. The rivers Alphios and Claudios shifted and flooded the valley. Silt-covered pedestals and pavements. For 1,000 years the place slept, remembered by words more than by stones. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Europeans began to dig where ancient writers pointed, and in 1875 systematic excavations began in earnest. The gymnasium's foundations came back to sun. The Palaestra's square reappeared. The start line of the stadion that bulbous with its grooves for toes lay bare again. The pedestals of the Zanes stood where shame had always stood, only with grass instead of crowds. A French aristocrat and teacher named Pierre de Coubertin believed that modern nations could learn something from a festival that joined competition with ideas of honor and peace. And in 1896, the first modern Olympic Games were held in Athens. The world had become different in materials and motives, but the shape was familiar. Young bodies and old hopes, a torch in more than one sense. What did it feel like, really, to compete? It felt like this. You stood on cool stone with toes and grooves cut by patient hands, and you realized how many feet had learned discipline where yours now stood. It felt like the sound of a starting cord whipping forward and the sting of air in your throat. It felt like oil on skin, sand on oil, dust on sand, and then a bronze blade scraping all of it away until some other version of you showed through fresher, quieter. It felt like knowing your father's name would be spoken after yours when your name was called, and that you could make him taller just by moving your legs. It felt like standing in a house where gods are the furniture and men are the guests, and wanting the host to notice you. It felt like losing and pretending not to care while your friends packed quickly and looked at the ground. It felt like seeing a line of bronze Zeuses telling you that every shortcut you are tempted to take has already been taken by someone with your face. It felt like taking off a wreath at night and putting it on a table and watching it wilt and understanding that this is perfect. Glory is not metal. It is a thing you must water with stories. It felt like going home by a road that remembered your feet. The valley is quiet now. Tents have come down. The ash altar is taller by an amount a man cannot measure with his hand. Somewhere in the dark, a boy is running because it is quicker than walking. And he discovers, for the first time, the private joy of moving as if bones were lighter than they are. Somewhere a mother tells her daughter that a Spartan named Kyniska found a way to win a wreath without touching the reins. Somewhere a traveler repeats the names of winners in the order he was taught. Name, father, city, a triple that makes a person a person. Somewhere a bronze statue frowns over a name and a crime, and reminds us that the Greeks knew the same temptations we do and invented public art to hold them in place. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. If your mind still hums, let it walk once more through the crypt and into the stadium, where early light lies long on earth and the marks of last day, as feet have not yet been scuffed away. Feel the grooves under your toes. Hear the judge's voice. Breathe in, slow as the Alpheus moves past plane trees. The old games are over, and they are also always about to begin. Glory in that valley was a wreath of leaves that withered in a day and survived in 1,000 years of telling. Tonight you have heard one more telling. Rest well,